The summer in Oakridge Estates had always been quiet, predictable, and orderly. Or at least that's what the HOA board promised every homeowner when we moved in. The manicured lawns, white fences, and the sparkling communal pool made the neighborhood look like a perfect little postcard. But perfect comes at a cost, and that cost was usually measured in petty rules, passive-aggressive letters, and the occasional Karen meltdown. I should have known that when it comes to Oakridge, perfection was just a facade. It all started one bright, sweltering Saturday morning. I grabbed my towel, sunscreen, and a cooler full of iced tea, ready to enjoy a peaceful morning by the pool. I had recently moved into the neighborhood, still learning the unspoken hierarchy of the HOA, and truth be told, I was looking forward to escaping into the crisp, blue water while my neighbors mowed their lawns and exchanged gossip over garden fences. As I approached the pool, I immediately sensed tension in the air. Across the pool deck stood Mrs. Karen Whitman, the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer of every minor rule. Her hair was perfectly coiffed despite the heat, and her eyes were scanning the area like a hawk. The moment she spotted me, her frown deepened. "Oh, look who's here," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I didn't realize you were allowed to use the pool today." I paused, confused. "What do you mean? I'm a resident. Isn't the pool open to everyone in Oakridge Estates?" Karen crossed her arms, tilting her head as though considering how best to humiliate me. "Technically, yes. But the board just sent out a notice. Anyone who hasn't attended the mandatory HOA meeting this month is suspended from pool privileges." I blinked, stunned. I hadn't received any notice. Not an email, not a letter, nothing. But Karen didn't wait for a response. She marched over to the pool office, where she apparently felt she had the authority to enforce rules without the board's direct supervision. A few minutes later, she returned with the pool manager, who gave me a pitying look. "Sorry, sir, the HOA rules are clear," he said. "I don't make them. You'll have to leave." I felt a flush of anger and embarrassment as families and neighbors watched the scene unfold. My first real attempt at enjoying community life had been cut short by Karen's rigid interpretation of rules. As I gathered my things and walked away, her triumphant smirk followed me like a shadow. Over the next few days, I tried to let it go. After all, Oakridge was supposed to be a peaceful place, and I didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily. But every time I passed the pool, Karen's smug face haunted me. It was the little things, the way she bragged about attending every HOA meeting, how she flaunted her rulebooks, how she treated minor infractions like criminal offenses. It all started to wear on me. Then, an idea began to form. A quiet, subtle plan that would give me some measure of control over the situation. I began researching the pool's infrastructure, asking questions about maintenance, water supply, and equipment during casual neighborhood chats. I learned that the pool relied on a single water pump system, and without it running, the water would stagnate, the filtration would stop, and the pool would be unusable. It was a simple, mechanical vulnerability, nothing illegal, just something the HOA and Karen had overlooked. I spent nights planning my approach, imagining the looks on Karen's face when she realized she could no longer dictate the terms of everyone's pool usage. But I didn't want to just sabotage the pool. No, I wanted to do it smartly, legally, in a way that would expose the ridiculousness of her self-appointed authority. A week later, I quietly purchased the water pump. It was sleek, modern, and powerful, enough to run the pool system independently. I arranged to have it delivered to my garage under the guise of general home maintenance. The thrill of taking action, of reclaiming some agency in the face of Karen's tyranny, was exhilarating. The next Saturday, Karen was already at the pool, clipboard in hand, performing her usual morning inspection. As she counted towels and surveyed the water for signs of rule violations, I wheeled my new pump onto the deck, plugging it into the pool system. The water began to flow, filtration humming smoothly, but something had changed. The system now ran through my pump, under my control. I had effectively seized the lifeline of the pool without touching a single HOA rule. Karen approached, her eyes narrowing as she noticed the new equipment. "What is that?" she demanded. "Just a little upgrade," I said casually, wiping my hands on my towel. "Figured I'd help keep the pool running. After all, maintenance is everyone's responsibility, right?" Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She didn't know what to say. The usual threats of fines and complaints were ineffective because this was within the bounds of home maintenance. The water kept circulating. The pool remained pristine. But the power dynamic had shifted. Over the next few hours, chaos ensued in Oakridge. Karen called the HOA board, but they couldn't order me to remove the pump. It was legally mine, installed on my property, servicing the pool through an agreed-upon connection. Neighbors whispered, some laughed, some gawked. I watched from a lounge chair, feeling a sense of vindication that was oddly satisfying yet tempered with disbelief at how far things had escalated. Karen tried everything. She emailed threats, circulated petitions, and even tried to rally the pool staff against me. But each attempt failed. The pool worked perfectly, the water clean and cool. And with each failure, her composure crumbled. Her neatly styled hair seemed to frizz in frustration. Her cheeks flushed from indignation, and her usual sharp tongue faltered when she realized she had no leverage. The neighborhood watched with bated breath, the drama unfolding like a slow-motion spectacle. Families who had silently tolerated Karen's reign of micromanaging rules now whispered to each other, some even secretly thanking me for disrupting the status quo. For once, the communal pool, Oakridge's supposed pride, became a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny. But I knew this was only the beginning. Karen would not give up so easily. She would find new rules to enforce, new ways to assert control, new angles to attack. And I, too, would need to stay one step ahead, carefully balancing legal boundaries, neighborly perceptions, and my own sense of satisfaction. Evenings became a time of reflection. Sitting on my porch, I watched the pool's shimmering surface from a distance, imagining the next chapter of this suburban saga. How far would Karen go? How would the HOA respond? And what clever maneuvers could I deploy to maintain my small victory while avoiding open conflict? The thrill of strategy mingled with the exhaustion of constant tension. Oakridge Estates had turned out to be anything but ordinary, and I realized that living in a perfect neighborhood came with unexpected complexities. The rules that promised order could just as easily become instruments of chaos when wielded by the wrong hands. As the sun set, I sipped my iced tea and let the sounds of the evening wash over me. The distant laughter of children, the hum of sprinklers, the faint clinking of pool water. Karen was still plotting, still scheming, and I was ready to meet her challenge. But for now, I had the pool, and that small victory tasted sweeter than I could have imagined. The story of Oakridge Estates, of Karen Whitman, and the battle over a simple swimming pool was far from over. The rules, the neighbors, the petty dramas, they were all pieces of an intricate puzzle. And I intended to keep playing, carefully, strategically, with eyes wide open and heart steady. Little did I know, the next move would come sooner than expected, and the suburban battlefield would escalate in ways even I couldn't fully predict. But one thing was certain. The quiet neighborhood was no longer quiet, and everyone had a front-row seat to the drama that was just beginning to unfold. The following week, the tension in Oakridge Estates had thickened like humidity before a summer storm. Karen Whitman's usual morning perambulations had transformed into something far more menacing. She lingered at the pool entrance, clipboard in hand, brow furrowed, eyes darting with a simmering sense of injustice. Every time I drove past, I saw her gesturing toward the pool manager, whispering furiously as though plotting an elaborate coup. Neighbors were beginning to notice the strain, too. Mrs. Thompson from 2 doors down commented to me over the fence, "I've never seen her like this. She looks unhinged." I smiled politely, but inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Karen's sense of entitlement was legendary, and she wasn't about to lose control without trying to escalate things. On Tuesday morning, I found a sharply worded letter slipped under my front door. It bore the HOA seal and Karen's unmistakable handwriting, commanding me to remove the pump immediately, threatening fines, and even legal action if I refused. The language was carefully designed to intimidate. "Your unauthorized intervention is unacceptable," it read. "The HOA will not tolerate this blatant defiance." I read it twice, savoring the absurdity. She truly believed that the HOA could demand control over equipment I legally owned. I filed it away with a grin, imagining the possibilities that lay ahead. Karen was marching into territory she clearly didn't understand, and that meant opportunity. By Thursday, the neighborhood whispers had grown louder. The gossip was deliciously subtle but undeniable. Karen had stormed into the pool area mid-afternoon, attempting to rally neighbors against me. She waved her arms, pointed fingers, and flung accusations with the precision of a seasoned tactician. But the more she shouted, the less she was taken seriously. People smiled politely and moved along, some exchanging discreet smirks behind her back. It was a slow unraveling of her control, and I watched from my window with an almost guilty pleasure. Then came the first true act of escalation. Early Friday morning, as I prepared to leave for work, I noticed Karen standing near my driveway, clipboard still in hand, shaking her head as though my very presence was a personal affront. She launched into a tirade about safety regulations, water flow specifications, and how my pump was jeopardizing the structural integrity of the pool system. Her voice carried across the street, and neighbors began emerging from their homes to witness the spectacle. I stepped outside calmly. "Good morning, Karen. Beautiful day for the pool, isn't it?" I said. She flinched, clearly not expecting a friendly tone. "It's not a matter of niceties," she snapped. "It's about compliance. You can't. I understand your concern," I interrupted smoothly, "but the pump is perfectly safe and fully within my rights to install. I even have the manual right here if you'd like to read it." I held up the neatly bound booklet with a casual flourish. Karen's lips pressed into a tight line. She glanced around, hoping for validation from neighbors, but found none. The murmurs of support for me were unmistakable now, subtle nods and raised eyebrows, acknowledging that she had overstepped. Her face reddened in frustration, a cocktail of anger and humiliation. By midweek, the HOA board finally got involved. They requested a meeting with me, citing community concerns and insisting that I explain my actions. I attended, walking into a room charged with tension. Karen was there, of course, looking triumphant and ready to pounce. Two other board members, Mr. Patel and Mrs. Rivera, watched anxiously, clearly caught between the charisma of law and the absurdity of Karen's vendetta. I presented my case calmly, outlining the technical specs, legal ownership of the equipment, and safety protocols. Karen interjected repeatedly, her voice escalating, fingers jabbing at the table. The room became an arena of micro-conflict, her shouting clashing with my measured explanations. Mr. Patel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, whispering under his breath, and Mrs. Rivera pinched the bridge of her nose. It was clear they were used to her theatrics, yet even they struggled to restore order. When the meeting ended, the board adjourned with an awkward, non-committal promise to review the situation. Karen, meanwhile, stormed out, muttering threats under her breath, casting venomous glares at anyone who made eye contact. It was the first clear sign that her escalation had reached new levels of obsession. Saturday arrived, and I made my way to the pool with my usual cooler and towel, trying to maintain a low profile. But Karen had planned a spectacle. She was stationed at the entrance with a fold-out megaphone, ready to deliver a morning tirade. The neighbors assembled reluctantly, some clutching pool towels, others just curious. Karen cleared her throat and began, loudly declaring that the pool was now a hazard zone, citing safety concerns about my pump. I walked over, smiling and carrying a glass of iced tea. "Karen, perhaps you'd like a closer look at the system?" I suggested, motioning to the pump. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might explode. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is a disaster waiting to happen," she shouted. I leaned casually against the deck railing. "It's running perfectly. In fact, the water is cleaner and more efficient than it's been in years." I gestured to a group of children diving in and splashing around. "See for yourself. Safety hasn't been compromised at all." A few neighbors chuckled, and some clapped quietly. Karen's face turned a shade deeper, like a ripe tomato, as her authority crumbled in real time. She opened her mouth, then closed it, flailing silently for words. The absurdity of the situation was palpable. Over the next few days, subtle acts of rebellion against Karen's rule began to appear. Neighbors who had previously been too timid to question her started leaving poolside notes expressing support for my actions. Some even thanked me in passing, discreetly but sincerely. The neighborhood, once under Karen's tight grip, was beginning to tilt toward a quieter, collective defiance. Karen responded with renewed vigor. She attended the next HOA board meeting dressed in a sharp, militaristic outfit, clipboard in hand, determined to wrest back control. She presented a list of alleged violations, technical complaints about water pressure, and procedural grievances. Her voice was strident, almost theatrical, as she attempted to portray herself as the guardian of Oakridge's sanctity. The other board members listened politely, their discomfort evident, and I could sense their private skepticism. I was prepared. I calmly countered each point with technical documentation, legal references, and procedural evidence. Karen's energy began to wane under the weight of logic and legality. I could see the frustration building, her cheeks flushed, hands shaking as she attempted to assert dominance through sheer volume. It was a delicate, high-stakes game of suburban chess, and I was enjoying the tension more than I probably should admit. By the following week, rumors began circulating that Karen had enlisted a lawyer to pressure me. Flyers appeared under doors, warning of potential fines for unauthorized equipment and water usage. She called meetings at odd hours, attempting to rally support, but the tide was turning. People were beginning to question her motives, her authority, and her obsession with minor rules over common sense. One evening, I received a text from Mrs. Thompson. Karen's gone too far this time. Some of the neighbors are thinking of petitioning for a review of HOA power. You might be the spark, you know. I smiled to myself, the stakes rising. The pool, the pump, and Karen's relentless enforcement had inadvertently ignited a wider discussion about fairness, authority, and communal living. What had started as a personal vendetta was morphing into a neighborhood movement, subtle but significant. That weekend, as the sun rose over Oakridge, Karen was already at the pool, clipboard in hand, looking exhausted and frustrated. I arrived with my cooler, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation. Children splashed in the water, neighbors chatted, and the subtle tension of rebellion lingered in the air like an electric current. Karen glared at me, and I returned the stare calmly, a silent acknowledgement that the game had only just begun. In the days that followed, I began to strategize my next moves carefully. Karen was unpredictable, and the HOA's response could swing either way. But one thing was certain, Oakridge Estates would never be the same. The suburban drama had escalated to a point where every action, every word, every glance had weight. The battle lines were drawn, and the neighborhood was watching. Late one evening, I overheard a conversation between two neighbors at the fence. "She's obsessed," one said. "I don't think Karen realizes how quickly this could spiral out of control." I smiled to myself, feeling the mix of satisfaction and apprehension. Karen's power trips, her obsession with control, and her relentless pursuit of authority had created an opportunity, an opening for change. But I also knew that the next escalation could be unexpected, even dangerous. Oakridge Estates was a powder keg of suburban politics, and the first spark had been lit. As I looked out over the pool, water glinting in the fading sunlight, I knew that the story wasn't over. Karen Whitman would not surrender easily. The HOA would continue to wrestle with authority and legality, and my role in this unfolding drama was far from complete. The suburban battlefield was alive